is that you yourself, the opposite of that is inferior. So when you think that way, then your actions will also reflect that. And more and more across America, you're seeing that among many white Americans, they are not seeing themselves as supreme anymore, because across the world, you're seeing other economies, other nations rising up militarily, rising up economically. So these things are in flux. They're changing. So we have to also watch and think about the language that we use when we refer to the term of white supremacy, because you are, as a black man, as a black woman, you are denoting that you are also inferior, and you shouldn't do that. When you talk about white supremacy, oftentimes people will start talking about IQ. Okay? And IQ has changed over generations, over centuries. IQs have changed, and IQ is determined by what someone does over and over again repeatedly, and also with education. When you, for a very long time, for hundreds of years in this country, African Americans were not allowed to read. They were not allowed to do these things. And anyone who thinks of themselves as supreme, then they would have no problem. They would not be afraid of allowing another group to learn how to read, to learn math, science, engineering, etc. They wouldn't be afraid of all of those things. So that's my position, Brother Phil, on that.
All right, now let's go to the young man, Douglas Hussar, order, as we got to keep in the room.
I love it, T. West. I love how you went back to the history of kind of where white supremacy came from. And I think that lesson is very important for most people to know, because we throw around this term without having any back history or knowledge of, or what is the backing behind these words. You know what I mean, culturally speaking. I do want to bring it to today. Since you did the past, I want to talk about today. I feel like it's used a lot in a slurred kind of way, where if you want to attack somebody, oh, you're a white supremacist. Or you might say, oh, you're a supremacist of some kind. And my definition and understanding of supremacist is someone saying, hey, here is a group of white people. If you want to say white supremacists, then we're going to say white people that control a large amount of money and business and movement within our economic society, and then have prejudice toward other cultures or other people, so to speak. And in particular, it will be African Americans in our cases. So that would be would that be correct in your guys' definition? So that is the old definition and the current definition as well. No, you don't believe that. Okay, well, why not? Why not?
No. Finish your spiel and go to Kevin. I'll deal with you.
Oh, okay. And then I did want to address earlier, you talked about Donald Trump being a white supremacist. I have not seen that on the news very much, so I've seen him try to sit down with African Americans. I know he had Omarosa up there for a while. We're not going to talk about that. But he has definitely been out there talking to African Americans. As much as people hate on Kanye West, he is African American, and he was speaking to Donald Trump. So perhaps he is trying to reach out and make some kind of connection in some kind of way. But white supremacist, I don't know. It seems like such a harsh term to throw at somebody without giving me actual facts. Like, I want to know, like, scenarios where he literally walked up to somebody and was like, you are stupid because you are black, or you are stupid because you're Hispanic, or you're Asian. You know, like, give me an actual example. Give me the tape. Give me the goods. You want me to pass it over? Okay, good.
Well, whether Donald Trump is, to you in those terms, a white supremacist, if anything, he's a bigot, and he's not getting the brightest of black people, because he's getting entertainers. And so if you're going to have somebody in the White House and you're going to have somebody talk about our issues, have somebody who, like a Brother Phil, like a Brother T. West, like so many other, whether they be YouTubers or activists in the community who are doing something. Don't get somebody who's bipolar, whose life is unstable, whatnot. So, you know, I'm talking about Trump. I had Kanye, the Kanye situation. Okay. You know, because both of their lives are unstable. But Kanye, what was the last thing he did for any community that we know of, at least? So, you know, if you're going to bring somebody, bring a Farrakhan in. You know, if you want to, because Farrakhan has thousands of young. But he's a leader in the community, yeah. And Kanye's not leading that many men, you know. Most of his people who buy his music are Caucasian. So, and he's a Kardashian now. So, you know, but whether you want to call him a white supremacist, he's a bigot at best. He's an adulterer. He can be redeemed by the blood of Jesus, but he ain't asking for forgiveness. And he said, you know, he's a pretty good person. And he's never had to ask. So that's a problem I have as a Christian.
All right. So everybody kind of speak on white supremacy and what they deem is white supremacy to them. Now, you know, out of the whole room, of course, we'll have to deal with Douglas a little more today than anyone else, because Douglas says that he doesn't see white supremacy. He don't know what it is, and that's it is because you haven't came to the knowledge of the truth. That's what it is. So let me ask you a question. When a black person commits a crime, okay? Let's say if a black person commits a crime, a white person commits a crime. Explain to me statistically why black people get more time in the criminal justice system than white people. Why?
Why do I think black people get more time in the criminal justice system than the white people get more time?
For the same crime.
For the same crime. For the same crime. Personally, I think it's a combination of a few things, but the one that I go back to, and people don't realize for me personally, is we as African Americans with our darker skin tone complexion, and not me in particular, you guys with even darker skin tones, there is a unconscious thought within a person's mind where this is just a scarier being, a stronger presence. And I'm not talking about culturally, I'm talking about artistically. If you look at the color wheel and the color scales, if you see a black man walking towards you, it represents power and it represents strength. And some people can be thrown, august, or back from that. If you see a small, white, very pale Asian woman walking down the street, you just don't feel as threatened as a large African American man. Now let's talk about culturally and psychologically, they might be the same person. They might both be strong leaders in their community. They might both be very activists. They might both have a family or something like that. They both can have all those things and be really nice people on the inside. But when you run against somebody physically and you just have that instant moment in your mind, I think it can be different with African Americans as opposed to other cultures. That's one thing that is just not discussed as Americans. What do you want to say, Phil?
All right, so let's recap what he just said. Because you're a darker skin tone, you are fear, correct?
Not fear.
No, you just described fear.
As having more strength or
it is translated to fear, correct?
It can be translated to fear.
Okay, who is these people?
I would say the police or the public mind can see it and they can be, but they really are seeing your strength.
Okay, so let's just cut to the chase. White society, correct?
I would not just say white society. It could be a Hispanic police officer. It could be a white police officer. It could be an Asian police officer. When they see a large African-American man walking down the street in the evening, they are quicker to just go, let me get it together, than a small Asian woman.
Okay, who taught you that?
No one taught me that. That is something that is, well, I will say someone taught me that. Art taught me that. When I was in school and going through life and learning colors and learning the strength of reds and the emotional attachments that come to them, black and the brown tones have a strength to them. It's a strong tone. When you see it emotionally, unconsciously, it's a strong tone.
Do you realize how idiotic that sounds?
Do you know how many artistic people are watching me right now and understand what I'm saying?
So basically, the inherent bias of slave masters on the plantation to teach anything darker than us is to be feared, and you're supposed to discriminate, and inherent bias. Everything comes from historical context in this society.
Okay, mine comes from an unconscious humanistic background.
Well, unfortunately, you're
being an animal.
Okay. Well, you want to call yourself an animal, that's you. But
You're human beings, sir, and human beings are part of the animal kingdom.
Okay, whatever. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the inherent bias that you're talking about was taught by the racists and the white supremacists, and they have injected that into every area of society, in school, in policing, and let's call it what it is. The society we talk about, white supremacy, is controlled by white people. Every system is controlled by white people, and you look at every system, black people are discriminated against more than any other group. Now, why?
I am not understanding your sentence because you just said to me, everything is controlled by white people, but we are sure as heck sitting in this room talking with a bunch of black people. What is your question? Can you clarify for me? I might have missed it. Give it to me again. Go ahead.
Okay. Who controls Politicon?
The people that made Politicon.
Is it black people?
I don't know. I didn't meet them. You might be assuming, I'm looking at you now, are you assuming that they are white? That they're all white? All the organizers and all the people that have main control over this organization are white?
Politicon is a black organization, yes or no?
I do not know.
Okay, so 9 times out of 10, T. West, you want to chime in on this, young man?
Well, so as I said in my intro, that I am not one who believe in the term white supremacy. because I do not believe that any group of people are supreme to another people. You have areas where various ethnic groups are very good at doing certain things. They're very good at it, and that's a characteristic of that group. Now, you have hatred, you have prejudices that is hurled at other groups of people, in this case, African Americans in particular. You have that. You had it with the colonization of the continent of Africa. You had all of that. You had blood diamonds. You have all of that. But when a group of people start thinking and believing that another group is supreme to themselves, and they start talking it, they start teaching it, when little black children grow up learning the term white supremacy, and they grow up learning and hearing their father say, the man, and the man has a connotation of meaning the white man. When they have that understanding and they grow up with that, they grow up, whether they want to admit it or not, they grow up with an inferiority complex. Now, you have many notable African-American men and women, Cordell West, Michael Eric Dyson, and many others. They hurl that term around white supremacy like it's rain and manna coming down from heaven. And that is very, very detrimental to African Americans, very detrimental. Now, you do not hear any other ethnic group on the planet, none. You don't hear the Chinese, you don't hear the Arabs, you don't hear any of those groups out there hurling that term around white supremacy, but you will hear it among African Americans a lot. So just like you use the term, I say it again because this is the psychology of it. Just like you use the term, African Americans use the term, the man. The man is coming. It means the popo is coming. The police is coming. Okay? You are demeaning yourself by saying that I am less than a man. Therefore, the term that has been used for generations, boy. Okay? So when we start talking about these things, we have to remember that the power is in the words that we use. The words that we use reflect how, even if it doesn't affect me, even though I may have it at an intellectual level, I may be able to intellectualize it and say, no, I don't believe in that. I'm using this term because you all out there in the audience have been conditioned to understand and know what white supremacy means. So therefore, I don't use the term. As I said, I use the term whiteism. You know, the isms indicate that there is something deficient right there with the methodology or the mental aspect of how one is thinking. So when we use the term, when we use it, we have to and we must think, why are we using it? And what good is it projecting? Especially among the youth who are out there. What good? You know, I had some of you know about Tariq Nasheed. I did an analysis on my channel, Percentage News, with Tariq Nasheed. He was debating Jared Taylor. And at one point during that debate, Tariq Nasheed, you know, he uses the term white supremacy very often. At one point, Tariq Nasheed stated this. He said, white people are smarter than black people. He actually stated it, okay? And that was an indication that he himself, even though he would not say, I feel it's inferior, it was an indication that he had an inferiority complex. So what you think, you speak. What you speak and think, you act out. So we have to be careful about those terms. So yes. So my term for it is whiteism. That's what it is. It's a deficiency in how people think. And I'll close with this. As I said, when you look at dominance in various areas, when you look at the police department across this country, yes, blacks are incarcerated. Yes, driving while black, gardening while black. You have all of that is happening in America. But even with that, we have to define that in its proper way so as not to heap more damage intellectually, mentally, upon the targeted group. In this case, we're talking about black America, African Americans.
No, I think I agree. I agree with T. West on a lot of that. And I think that black people in America need to travel to outside so you can unconditioned and get a cleanse of your mind. Because when you go to different countries in Africa, you will see black people running things, and you will see, even when the French governments are behind the scenes of things, it's black folks, black presidents, black everything. You can go to, even Atlanta, some things are black on black on black. And we have our little pockets, but I see a global view, because to me, we all need each other. Everybody needs each other. I haven't seen a so-called great country that only has one type of person. There's some things that Asians do great, and they're just culturally, it's ingrained in them. People could say that about black people, about so many other things. They always like to say it's sports or it's singing, but there's so many other things that we do that are great, that they need us for. That's why, when Trump says close the borders, how can you close the borders when this was once their land, and that we need these people, because I surely don't want the jobs that they're taking. I don't want those jobs. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. All right. So as you heard everybody's responses to it, say Mr. Douglas here, he's all over the place today.
I disagree.
He's definitely all over the place because, as I stated before, and many, many times on my platform, is that you look at the housing market, black people discriminated against more than any other group. You look at business loans, black people discriminated against more than any other group. If you have a black-sounding name, you get a 50% reduction in callbacks for the same resume as a white person. It did all kind of researches and studies on this. Medical care is worse for black Americans than it is for white Americans. You can go to any institution in this country, and it shows that black Americans in particular are treated worse for many areas, right? But we want to say, well, there's no such thing as white supremacy. Listen, terminology, I get what he's saying when he said about the terminology, and I don't believe nobody's supreme to me at all. Forget them. It's true. I'm happy with myself. All one supreme to me is God. That's how I feel about it. But when you describe the system that you're in, you got to call it what it is. You can say, you can say whiteism, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. The control and domination of white people in a racial caste system that we live in, and blacks are at the bottom, and blacks are treated all the worst. Now you talk about other groups, right? They don't say Chinese supremacy. Why? Because in this system, they have not systematically targeted Chinese like blacks. Blacks came out of slavery, built their own towns, their own businesses. And we've seen them doing Reconstruction, right? They came in and destroyed black progress. They sabotage blacks even to this day. They don't sabotage the Chinese like they sabotage us. They don't sabotage the Arabs like they sabotage us unless they become an enemy. Now, if Donald Trump makes a tweet tomorrow and say the Chinese are spying in this country and you should go at the Chinese in the Chinatown, watch. They'll become an enemy overnight, which I can see Trump doing that not too long because he's battling with China. But no one in this country has our story. No one. Chinese, matter of fact, Chinese, Arabs, other Africans can even come to this country. It wouldn't be for African Americans fighting and dying for all the rights that we have. That immigration bill that was given was because of us. Affirmative action because of us. Everybody benefits off of African Americans, then they have a proverbial screw African Americans, and you the worst of the worst, while they step on our backs when they come into the country, right? Everybody looks down on African Americans. Well, yet when we fight for everything. But then we say, and we're sick and tired of the crap from the Democratic Party, we're sick and tired of it from other groups coming in and stepping on our back, even white women benefit from affirmative action, but then they go to the Supreme Court saying that they discriminated against because Kennedy at first made it for African Americans, then Johnson came in and changed it with women and all these other different groups when they didn't fight for anything, right? So maybe T. West can correct me if I'm wrong. But what I'm sick and tired of is my people being treated wrong just for being black, or being feared. You be fearing me because I'm black. But when you look at the crime statistics, more cops are killed by white folks. We look at the crime statistics, not Pookie and Ray Ray. Pookie and Ray Ray run when they see the cops. We know. We get bullets in the back when we run into the cops. But the main ones that kill cops is white Americans. They got guns. You think black men can have guns like a lot of white Americans have guns? Hell no. The ATL be at the house. DEA and everybody else be at your house. Black men can't have guns like that. But black men are the ones to be afraid of. Black men are trying to be your friend. Black women want to be your friend, but you turn against us, and that's fine for other groups of people coming across the border, coming from China, Russia, whatever. What I'm saying is, Nobody gonna tell me on the history of this country, even today, that black people are discriminated against, murdered, disenfranchised more than any other group. And it's related to bias, it's related to hatred of the black man and black woman by your actions.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, with let's say, for example, other ethnic groups. Let's say the Chinese. With the Chinese, my statement was that with the Chinese, you will not hear their academians, their social activists. You will not hear them out there hurling the term white supremacy. You don't want to hear that. That's where you see a difference right there. And then you also see a difference generally in areas of economics, of business entrepreneurship. Now, so you have to ask the question, okay, these differences right here, how might these differences right here affect the outcome of African Americans versus the outcome of these other ethnic groups over here? And what Phil said about how African Americans built this country, that is so 100% correct. Built the country when the country was raw, meaning that there was no infrastructure, there was nothing here. You brought, the Europeans brought Africans over here to do the farming, to build this country, to make this country great. So, you know, you have the term, make America great again. Well, America was greatest at its greatest point when African Americans were enslaved in this country to build the great wealth of this country. So you had, from that wealth, from agriculture, from the agricultural revolution, which brought great wealth to this country, that was then invested into the industrial revolution. The wealth from the industrial revolution was then invested into the technological revolution. The wealth from the technological revolution today is now being invested into the nanotechnology revolution. So nothing from nothing leaves nothing. So where did this wealth come from? This wealth came from the massive bringing of hundreds of thousands of enslaved African peoples into the United States of America. When you talk about the Continental Railroad system that was built in America, it was the Africans who were building in the eastern part. And then it was the Chinese who were building in the western part, where you had the Continental Divide, where the railroads then merged and met each other. So today what you have, of course, I feel you've been to Ethiopia and all, you have the Chinese who are big, huge investors in Africa. So that's a big partnership. That's a good partnership. But going right back to the subject matter, the big difference, the glaring difference is that the Chinese intellectuals, unlike so many black intellectuals who were trained by many of the white professors in the 1950s and 1960s, who trained them and taught them the use of the term white supremacy, the Chinese, other Asian groups, and other groups, even the Hispanic groups, you will not hear their giants, their academians using and hurling that term very often, white supremacy. Now why? The reason is because they know that that is a mentally deficient term that demeans their own people. The moment you say that someone is superior to yourselves, what happens? Many of you give up. Many of you don't fight as hard as you should fight because you feel and you believe that that effort will not be rewarded. So you have that. You have that right here in America. So feel what you're saying about the imprisonment rate, the incarceration rate, even the disease, any kind of major disease that's in the world. You know, yes, with whiteism, they define it as, oh, well, it started from Africa. The African bees. Oh, Ebola. Oh, that's Africa. Oh, HIV/AIDS. Oh, that's Africa. All of these, and these are retroviruses, and retroviruses come out of laboratories, okay? Public Law 91-171, 1969. Public Law 91-171, United States, okay? The creation of what was called synthetic biological agents. Okay, these are facts. These are congressional historical records. So you had things that have been thrown at African Americans more than it has been thrown at any other ethnic group. Now they throw things at the Chinese also. Okay, you have biological warfare that was carried out also in China, where planes were flown in after World War II, and they would drop various insects. United States, Britain would drop various insects into Chinese territory. So, but I won't go into all of that. But it is very, very important that we check how we think. And when we check how we think, then we can monitor the type of words that we're using. Are the words that we're using, are they empowering? Are they words that build us up, or are they words that tear us down? I may be very strong, but that little a 5-year-old child over there listening to me saying white supremacy, and that little male black child says, well, Daddy, if they're superior, what does that mean that I am? That means that I'm inferior. Okay, so the words that we use, we have to not provide the gun. These are gun. These are killing words. These words destroy black youth. And we're seeing across this nation, we're seeing black youth being destroyed. And we have to do the things as leaders to change that situation, to change that equation. And some things we not only learn from ourselves and our leaders, but we also learn from watching and observing others, especially if others seem to be doing better in certain critical areas. That's very, very important. And you also mentioned Donald Trump. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to drop it. Okay, Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, Donald Trump came out and said to African Americans on a number of occasions, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Okay? All right, now what is Donald Trump? Donald Trump is the president of the United States, okay? Is that power? That's a yes or no answer. Is that power? Hell yes, it's power. The power of the presidency, the power of the White House, there's power there. Now, are you going to sit at the table with someone who has no power? The Congressional Black Caucus? They have no power, really. Or are you going to sit at the table with someone who has some power with an executive order, with those things? Who are you going to sit at the table with? And I'll close with this. You have to make, whoever it is, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever it is, whoever your representatives are, you have to make them accountable to what your demands are. But you have to have a demand list. You have to have an agenda. You have to have a national agenda. You have to have a black national agenda. And that's what we're talking about, a black national agenda. I am not talking about a people of color national agenda, because as Phil was saying, when affirmative action came into place, some said, well, that's your reparations right there, African Americans. But affirmative action mostly benefited the white females, and then it benefited all the other minority ethnic groups, but it did not primarily benefit African Americans. So what you have to have something that is distinct and that is specific to African Americans. Why specific to African Americans? Because we built this.
Let me add to something you just said about earlier. You mentioned the Chinese. The difference with the Chinese, when Mr. Lee come over, Mr. Lee still has his name. He still has his culture. He can reach back to China and connect with China. When they came to my ancestors coming over, they were stripped of their name, stripped of their heritage, stripped of our language. We were supposed to be speaking no English. We are stripped of Africa. Now we don't even know what country we connect to in Africa. A lot of us are trying to get back into contact with Africa. We don't have no connection to Africa. But they have all the Arabs. So why would you call it any kind of supremacy when you go to China and everybody look like you running something? Or you go to an Arab nation and everybody look like you running something? Most African Americans are so propagandized by the fake white supremacist media that Africa's mud huts and warlords, and then when I go and I show them, no, it's not, and then African Americans are like, oh my God, I didn't know they had hotels like that, and I didn't know this, and like, it's sad. It's so sad. They're so anti-Africa, and who taught them to be anti-Africa? In school, you're not taught good anything about Africa. So when I talk about the system of, when I say white supremacy, when you have people who are destroyed, black people right now are broken, hurting, destroyed people. And to tell them, don't call it a name, they're not even trying to hear that from you. I'm broken, I'm hurting. What's going on? My community didn't provide nothing for me. Every time I look up something about me, it's horrible. We loving hip-hop. We thugging it, loving it, or whatever you want to call it. That's all we are. But every other group is nice and promoted, and now, like I said, they bring people into the country that don't look like us. They have a stereotype, Asians are the model minority, which that terminology, that was a counter to Martin Luther King back when he was fighting. See, be like the Asian people. They're not, well, why should they get involved with our stuff? They wasn't getting lynched like us back in that time period. Why would they? And most groups come in to get along and go along. So they go along with white society. And some of them don't like black folks because, hey, white folks don't like them. Not all white people, but those who have white supremacist views. So when you have a hurting black person in the neighborhood, they ain't trying to hear all that from nobody. They say, let's identify this, and how can we move to doing for self? That's my thing. Doing for self. Have our own economy like the Chinese. Have our own banks. Have our own schools. See, Chinese are taught by Chinese, so why would they think about any kind of supremacy? We talk about white people. Everything is white people for black people. We never see black teachers. We never see black doctors and lawyers most of the time. We never see black anchors on the news. Everybody don't look like us, so it messes us up in the head.
I do think that we have a uphill battle still as an African American community, where we're still trying to train our generations and us as a people to change our job location and change our stereotype of what we're good at. Air quoting right there, because that is how I do believe we get those new businesses, we get our own economy, we get our own finances, because you just can't go to other cultures and say, hey, look, can I have this and can I have that? If you were to be of that culture, they're much more likely to be like, well, you remind me of my niece or my uncle, or it's an unconscious, like, yeah, I like you better. We have to, as African Americans, say to ourselves, it's going to be an uphill battle. That's fine. But we're stronger than that. Clearly, through our history, we have shown we do not die and we do not fade away. We keep pushing forward and we keep becoming better. And I think we need to move into the new space. And if you ask me what that new space is, you need to get into tech. I'm talking about the young African Americans that are watching this, or anyone that knows someone that thinks, oh, what kind of push should I put my child into? You know, I know he wants to be this, but he needs a job. If you want a job, put your child into cybersecurity. Put your job into some kind of tech-based thing, UI development, something like that, because that is the future, and that is a space that African Americans have proven they're good at. One of the creators of Twitch.com is an African American. If you want to talk about track record and say, oh, can black people do tech? We can do tech just like Asians can do tech. We can do tech just like any of these other stereotypes they can do it. So I want to encourage people to go out there and get different kind of jobs than the McDonald's job. And it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy like people like to think, oh, well, I will just quit my job, and I know I have 3 kids, but I'll let them starve for 2 weeks. No, you can't quit your job. You can't stop what you're already doing. You just have to turn off the television on Wednesday night and go to a meeting about business. You have to turn off the television and go with your husband or your wife and learn a new skill on the side. So when you hit that 6 o'clock at night and you think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to lounge for the next 3 hours, use those 3 hours to encourage yourself and then move yourself into a new space. So one day when you have the skills set up, or you have your space for YouTube, or you've taken the classes to become a UI developer, or whatever it may be, young people and or adults, you can do this if you're older, you can get into tech. If you're that person, you've done that for a couple weeks, a couple months, you'll finally be at that place where you go, guess what I'm doing on Wednesday? What you doing, Rick? But I'm leaving McDonald's. You sound hella stupid right now. No, I'm going to stay here for the next 8 years. Okay, well, I'm going to go work at this new business. It's a startup, and they needed a UI guy to design their application. I applied. I showed up. I was intelligently dressed and performed above average because, God knows, we have a weird stereotype on top of us. And that way I am going to get out of the situation. No, man, you can't do it. This is another thing in our culture. We like to tell each other, no, man, you can't do it. We're not good enough. There's a white supremacy issue. The white people are going to not give you that job. You shouldn't even apply, nigga, blah, 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 all these different curse words and madness. Just tell them all no. Tell them I am going to change our stereotype. And in 10 years, when I have an amazing job, I will be able to pull someone else up to have an amazing job, regardless of their color, because guess what? We're breaking stereotypes at Urban Game Changers. Go ahead, I'm going to pass this microphone.
Well, I'm so glad I can agree with Douglas on something, because we do need to change our thought. The American school system for all kids lied to a lot of us and said, do what you love to do. You don't do what you love to do. You do what pays. And the thing about tech, the thing about nursing, the thing about medicine, and we have a program called CNA2MD.com where we've mentored hundreds of people, nurses to doctors, whatnot, because of my wife's profession. And she has gone through those whole tracks. CNA2MD.com. And so you can check it out. And tech doesn't care. If you know Python, you know Python. If you know C++, you know C++. And most of these jobs, you can make 6 figures sitting at home. And if you're not making 6 figures with one job, you can pick up another job while you have a job. So I agree with you on that. But it comes into the parenting. The parenting. And kids need to know, if you're going to take out these student loans and you're going to do it for something like I did. I'm going to use myself as an example. A liberal arts education, we don't need any more liberal arts in America at all. We need some more tech people. We need some more nurses, some more doctors, because there's an over 1 million shortage for nurses and doctors. And so we don't need it. And Mark Cuban says there's going to be a tech decline because we've been part of programs where programs are teaching inmates how to code. So once inmates start coding, those jobs are going to decline. So we got to go into tech, but then we also have to say, what happens when people are ready to only pay $60,000 when the salary used to be $180,000? So tech is great, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. And always look at business, and always know in tech, I'm always going to go to Africa. My spirit is in Africa. And Africa needs tech right now. Boom. We need more people doing tech, and we need more doctors, and we need more lawyers in Africa. So it's like the gold rush. People flooded to California because of the gold. You go where the opportunity is. Now people in California, you may need to leave here and go to, Phil loves to say Houston. I love to say go wherever the money is and get in where you fit in. Oh, sorry.
No. Okay, no. Just pull the mic back a little bit. You're getting a little.
Now, you mentioned tech, which tech is a good thing. But if you know anything about tech, it's dominated by white and Asian people. There's a lot of black people in tech cannot get into Silicon Valley. They're sitting at home right now because they do not let black people in. Now, that goes back to what I stated earlier. Black people are discriminated against more than any other group, even if we have the... Well, you talking about a job. You're not talking about entrepreneurship. You're talking about a job. Sir, you were talking about a job. I don't think job. I think entrepreneurship. I believe our freedom is in entrepreneurship because I am personally tired of black people begging white folks for anything. I believe we need our own. Like when desegregation was happening, segregation. We had our own everything. Our own hotels, our own schools, our own grocery stores, our own plumbers, our own everything. And then the moment desegregation happened, now I can go over there with Miss Marianne over there. Now I let all my stuff go. And that's why black folks are the condition that we're in today because we don't have no institutions or structures. I can't even think of a black hotel in my mind. That's a 5-star hotel. Maybe there are a few out there. I think I see one. But it used to be everywhere in the black community. Theaters. Where's the black movie theater? We don't have that. And because we are so dependent upon white people. And white folks tired of us being dependent on them. Let's call it what it is. They tired. They can't even do things for themselves. They can't figure out their own problems. And then we still say, oh, well, Mr. White Man, help me. No, I believe in doing for self. That's what I believe in. This is what I teach. And that's how you counter white supremacy is doing for self. Building your own tech companies. Don't beg Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook for a job. Building your own media companies. Don't be begging NBC, Fox to do anything. That's what I did. I did my own media company. They wouldn't let me on TV. I talk too much. They would not let me on TV. I tell them where they can go and what they can do with it. But on my own platform, I can do that. So we have a freedom as African Americans today to do what our ancestors did after slavery, right? And build for ourselves. So when it comes to black Americans in the Democratic Party, they want us to continue to beg white folks for everything. And if we have a little program to keep us, low income, we're okay. I'm saying no, we don't need to be low income. We need to be middle, upper income. Millionaires. That's how I believe. Billionaires. No different than Mark Zuckerberg or anybody else. And the only thing I did not like you said earlier, when you start changing your voice to some stereotypical, I know brothers that talk just like that. That's very smart. Brothers that you can take a brother that's selling dope. You say, okay, he know about moving product. He know about sales or whatever. That brother could turn around and be a millionaire. Because some people you could talk to that he could talk to that you can't. They look at you like, man, you can't talk to you. I'm not going to deal with you. But other people may deal with that dude because he come from the streets or whatever. So I never
say the way they spoke, but what they're
yeah, but that's what you said intelligently dressed. If that person wears a ball cap and some shorts, you don't know if that person could be the greatest coach. Of course, what brother you know is dirty?
What I mean.
I don't know no brother is dirty out here.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that brother could be the best coder on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
So I never want to judge somebody by how they dress.
Yeah.
I want to judge them based on their character, like Martin Luther King said, and what they do. But I pass that to Brother T. Webb.
Well, okay, movie theaters. You mentioned movie theaters. Who owns AMC theaters? China owns the AMC theaters. So theaters are not what they used to be. And the economy and things are not what they used to be. So I like to talk about right now, what is now and where you want to go, where we should go in the future. Okay, so I came from a high-tech background. That was my area. I retired from that. But that's where I started at, business intelligence, analytics. That's what I did for a living. And I raised 3 daughters with that. And one of my daughters, very good mathematician, excellent, just really, really good at it. But she loved modeling also. She's about 5'9". She loves doing that kind of stuff. So she was going to University of Arizona, and this is speaking to you, my brother. This was going to the University of Arizona, and she, after her first year there, she came and she said to me, Daddy, she said, look, I'm not into this. I don't want to do it. Very good at engineering, very good at mathematics, but she didn't want to do it. I said, well honey, what do you want it to do? She says, I want to do my music. And I had taught them how to play music also, so I'm also a musician, and I had taught the 3 daughters how to play music. So she says, I says, okay, well, I'll tell you what. Because I know if your heart's not in that, you're not going to do well with it. It'll just be a waste of money, okay? So I says, okay, what you do, I says, give it 2 years, go ahead and go with that music and see where that takes you. Well, okay, well, it took her where she wanted to go. So she went up like this. She played for Prince, Quincy Jones, and others, okay? And then also, what I'm saying, and the moral of that story is this. Know who you are, first of all. Know who you are. Know where your love is, and know if you're capable of doing whatever you love to do. And if you know that you're capable of doing that, and then pursue that. Even if it's not one of the STEM programs, okay? STEM being science, technology, engineering, mathematics, okay? And then the other area, Brother Phil, is with China. China, what you have, being in the tech, coming from the tech industry myself, I've seen lots of different groups in the tech industry. I've seen African Americans out there too, but there weren't a hell of a lots of African Americans out there in that tech industry. But when you push and you promote the STEM program, you will get more of them in that particular area. So when we talk about progress for African Americans here in this country, we have to look at it from the standpoint of where do we want to go, not where we were. For example, you mentioned segregation. Okay, segregation, where you had, just by the sheer fact that you had to create, as African Americans, you had to create your own businesses. You had to do that. You had to create all of that. During segregation, you had no choice, okay? If you didn't have a store in your community, somebody came up with a store. You were forced to do that. Now, you have to have both entrepreneurship and you also have to have jobs, okay? Because Bill Gates did not become a billionaire from entrepreneurs buying from him. He became a billionaire from who buying from him? Each one of you, and most of you have a job. Most of you are not entrepreneurs, and most of you will never, in history, there have not ever been a majority of entrepreneurs. They're workers. They're workers getting paid low wages and high wages, okay? So we have to have both, but what we want to encourage is for you to be the best. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, to be the best that you can be at being an entrepreneur. If you're going to be a worker bee, and there's nothing wrong with worker bees, because ant colonies do quite well with worker bees and worker ants, etc. Everybody have their role, but know what your power and your strengths are, and then pursue those strengths. And don't chase after a dream that is not real, and that can never be real. We have to be realistic with these things. We have to be. We must be, and we must do that with our children.
I just want to speak on money. I want to talk about money for a second. We have 10 minutes left. Got you. So I just want to speak about money real quick when it comes to white supremacy. We talk about white supremacists and how they may control a business and how they may control a group of things that are happening in our community. But like we were saying earlier, it has to come down to economics and what they can control with their businesses and how they move their money. So I want to talk to black people and say, hey, if you're African American or if you're Hispanic or if you're a minority and you feel like I have a disadvantage culturally speaking, this is how you handle your money. Dude, let's say you get a good job. Let's say you go into tech and you get a really nice job and you get $300,000 a year. If you do not manage your money afterwards correctly, you have wasted not only your own efforts, but your entire historical, cultural effort. You need to start to build a legacy for the future. You talk to the Jewish people, they have money for days. You think that money came from the young person that's standing in front of you? No. The young person who stood there 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago put in a plan in place financially to keep their money rotating. If you want to learn how to get your money rotating infinitely within your own community, it's about buying real estate. It's about purchasing investments. It's about getting into some business and saying, hey, look, I own a business where if I were to walk away for 2 years, this business would keep running and keep going by itself. That's what you have to learn after you get that money, after you get that good job. You need to then say, I'm going to take responsibility for this money, and if I die tomorrow, I have a trust, a will, something in place that will continue to push on past me. And you say to yourself, that seems like a lot, Douglas. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know how to learn how to do that. Go look up Robert Kiyosaki's book. It's an audio book if you don't like to read. I don't like to read. I'm not gonna lie, I listen to the audio version. Go listen to the audio version if you have to. Educate yourself. Ask people around you, what's your money situation? A lot of you adults that watch me and know who I am, I sit down with you and I said, what's your job? When did you start to work? How much money do you have? Do you have any passive income? Build your passive income. That way you control your finance for the today, the tomorrow, and the future for your children and all African Americans. So when you sit down with somebody and they say, oh, well, I need you to do this and this and this, you won't have to say, oh, well, I have to do this, this, and this because I need that money for next week. Stop paying for Netflix every single month. Stop going out and buying a boat when you finally get some money in your life. Go out and buy a house that then gives you return every single month, positive cash flow over $500. That's what we need to do as a community once you have that finances. You see, we've taken it from zero. We went from what is supremacy all the way to you need to build financial wealth to overcome it. That's what we have done as a panel just right now. So if you're still watching with us, go look at these different websites that he's given you, that I've given you. I'm going to ask you to say that again. Robert Kiyosaki's books. Go read those kind of things and check in with Urban Game Changers. I'm going to pass this mic. Okay.
You would have just dropped the mic. We could have just, right there. That's what I was expecting. Because, I mean, you're right. You know, we have to invest better. We have to read more. And nothing's wrong with audiobooks because we're just in that technology age and everybody's on the go, on the rush. So I agree with you. And it's cna2md.com, and I'm sure they can rewind and they can go check things out and send, you know, their emails and say, hey, we have a system for them. But you're right. And so with that, I have nothing else to say.
Okay. And just real close, if y'all are thinking to yourself, I don't have time to read an audiobook or educate myself, you drive in the car in Los Angeles or wherever state you live in for 4 dang hours in the car anyways. You can put it on the radio instead of some kind of ridiculous thing. Okay, anyways, fast enough.
Hey, use your time. Now, he was talking about spending for African Americans. I mean, their spending power estimated at $1.4 trillion, but the money only stay in the black community only 6 hours. That's the problem. You know, the white people circulate their money about, 14 days, correct? And I think Jewish people close to, 28 days or so within their community? Yeah, a lot longer. So that's a big problem with our spending as African Americans. And it goes back to how we feel about ourselves as African Americans. We don't love ourselves, and we value name brands that wasn't created by black people at all. It could be a white-owned company. Hold on, keep some order. So white-owned companies, Italian names, whatever. We put that on and, we feel validated. But it is a emptiness that we have as African Americans. And once we get that knowledge of self, that's important for us, then that's when we make changes to think, well, wait a minute, I don't have to beg nobody for nothing. I can create my own companies. I can keep my money in my community because, trust me, if every African American, if Donald Trump said, all y'all get out, go back to Africa, it would literally crash the economy, the way we spend. We are the biggest consumers and the biggest spenders in America. And they know this. That's why they haven't shipped us back to Africa. Those who racist say go back to Africa, trust me, if they could, they probably would. I don't know. But they would crash this economy. Nobody else spend money like African Americans, period. We carry culture in this country. We lead that. We innovate on social media. I mean, what they call Black Twitter and all these different ones. We lead. Or even programs that think about if Twitter was possibly black owned. But once we get the game of ownership is the key. And stop begging people. Watch how the black community turn around. See, the reason why we feel bad about ourselves is because we don't own anything. Everybody else have it, but we don't. So yes, in my platform, I identify white supremacy, and I talk about, okay, now we know what the problem is. You see how we're being treated. Now let's move it to doing for self. That's how I do it. I'm not going to beat you down all day about, look what they did to us. I'm going to say, look, they don't like you, okay? Fine. Now let's move on. And I teach that all the time, at least on my platform. I don't hate nobody. I love everybody. Like Donald Trump said, he love everybody. But now, seriously, I'm cool with anybody. If you love me, I love you. You hate me, I hate you too, times two. That's how I operate. If you forgive me, I forgive you. You don't forgive me, well, forget three people that look like you. That's how, and your mama. But that's how I feel. We as African Americans got to be like that because we're too passive as African Americans. We let too many people step over us. We forgive everybody. No. Other groups don't tolerate that. We shouldn't tolerate that either. So we need to do for self, build an economy for black people, and don't feel bad about it. When we say, let's start joining the black-owned banks, we don't need our liberal friends to come in and say, well, isn't that racist to have a black-owned bank? Well, is it racist to have a white-owned bank? I'm just saying, what's wrong with that? Asians got their banks. Jewish people got their banks. There's nothing wrong with that. You should have something for yourselves. That's fine. And I get it. You don't want us around too much. I get it. If we move into your neighborhood, too many black folks, even if the black folks are doctors, lawyers, let's say he tech, he's PR, he can have a multi-million-dollar firm, and 30-year-olds move in, white folks move out. Come on, call it what it is. They don't want to be around us like that. It's called white flight. It happens all the time. No, it's the truth. Everybody on this panel, well, except you, know about that. But that's why we had to build our own neighborhoods. I'm not trying to say go to white people's neighborhoods and have our own neighborhoods that we could build for ourselves. And that's what I promote. I think that would turn around the black community.
Well, okay, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'll be very quick. It is very, very important for we as African Americans to realize this, that, as I said, we built this country, okay? When it was nothing, we built it through a few hundred years of slavery, then Jim Crow, and then sharecropping, and then now also the continuing discrimination. So I just want to quickly say this. In 1964, you had the Civil Rights Act. In 1965, you had the Immigration Naturalization Act. And the Immigration Naturalization Act was also a part of sabotaging African American advancement in this country. And you saw that with the 13th and also the 14th Amendment. You saw that. It was a way of sabotaging African American progress. Affirmative action was a way of sabotaging. So if you have not addressed, if there has not been restitution, you've heard in the media how some lawyers have been paid for attorneys to actually represent illegal immigrants and their children who have been incarcerated because they entered the country illegally. And they're using the word restitution and they're using the word reparations. There is no other group in this country outside of African Americans who deserves restitution and reparations for those hundreds of years of enslavement. In 2020, it would be the 400th year of African Americans being here in this country, building this country, never paid for that. Affirmative action was sabotaged, and then the Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965 went on to sabotage it even further. In those affirmative action programs, as I said earlier, all the other groups are the ones who primarily benefit from those programs, including white females. So it is very, very important that we have an agenda as African Americans. I have a 21-point plan, national agenda, that pushes and promotes what the black national agenda must be, regardless of political party. You have this checklist. You present it to the Democrats who are running. You present it to the Republican, the independent who is running. And then there's a checklist. Do you support this, 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 this? And if they don't support those items, then you do not support them. So that is a national agenda. And you don't know of, I don't think any of you can tell me right now of the DNC, the Democrats, who have a national black agenda. You can't tell me that they do. They don't. They have maybe an agenda for people of colors, the LGBT, open borders agenda. You can't tell me that the Republicans have a national black agenda. They don't have that. Okay, so that's what we have right now. That's what we are promoting right now, is a black agenda for black America. You have to specifically say black America, because when you say people of color, everybody else pile on, everybody else come in, they get theirs, and you still left out there holding, you still left out there in the prison system, out there being arrested, driving while black, gardening while black, whatever, sleeping while black, whatever. You know, little black child, 9-year-old. You saw what happened to him when that white woman in Brooklyn said that he touched her on the ass. Okay? She lied. Okay? You hear cases of this almost weekly, and Phil covers it very good on the Advice Show. He covers it very good, and that's very good. That is a very good service, because it's putting that out there in the eyes of people so that it reminds them, it reminds you of what blacks have gone through in this country for generation after generation, and then you have these newcomers who come in here and say, we deserve this, we deserve that. And we're saying, no, we're pushing back.
All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and wrap up this section of the panel. We just talked about white supremacy, the history of it, and our futures as Americans, and what we think needs to happen in the African-American community to overcome this kind of word, this kind of saying. We heard from T. West say that it should stop being said as a word because it puts us down mentally. We heard Phil talk about how you need to just end it, and you need to, what did you say? What was your kind of closing statement? I don't even remember. Y'all go watch back the video, okay? We all had amazing points. We all talked about money. We talked about so many different things. If you didn't check it out, then start the video over and watch it again, because I know this is going to be an encouragement in your life. It's going to change the way you think, and you need to take it step by step to change the mindset of your own thought patterns. With that said, we are Urban Game Changers, and we thank Phil coming on from the Advice Show. And what was your name again, brother?
Kelly.
And what was your people's name again?
CNA2MD.com.
Okay, I'm going to keep pushing it because I want you guys to go look it up, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the future. Urban Game Changers. Hey!